Hello everyone, welcome back to the DJSCE IIM podcast. This is the season 2, episode 3 of the podcast. I am Devi Nandu, the co-chairperson of DJSCE IIM, and with me I have Dhyanesh Shah, the co-founder of Mozaic Wellness. Dhyanesh started his journey with DJ in the year 2001 to 2005, after which he moved to IIM Ahmedabad to pursue his MBA. Then he co-founded two startups. First one being SB Green India, and the second one Mosaic Wellness. Can you tell a little more about?
Sure. So thank you for having me, Devi. Yes, feels great to be back in college after a lot of years as such, but it's great to be back here. I think it's been almost 19, 20 years, 2005, 20 years, life takes a full circle in some way and form. So my background is post BJSCE. Actually, before going to B school, I spent a year with Oracle doing technology. And then post B school, I joined McKinsey. I was working with a lot of large corporates on various business problems that they were facing. Did that for about 5 or 6 years. Uh, then, of course, SB Greenfields happened. It's a startup in the clean energy space. That didn't work out so well. We folded that very quickly, and I went into investing with 8 crores of Iterating, looking at investing in venture and growth stage companies in India in various different segments and sectors. Spend a lot of time on financial services, consumer healthcare, these are the spaces I invested in. And before we started Mozaic Wellness in end of 2019, uh, and the last 6 years has been in building. So I actually think about it as I've had 4 or 5 very distinct careers, not 4 or 5 jobs, because they all actually took me in very different directions, starting with technology at Oracle, then consulting with McKinsey, uh, uh, for a startup which was in the manufacturing space, very different altogether, then investing, and now Mosaic Wellness. So in a way, I've been lucky to have 5 very different types of experiences over this period.
How do you think all of this helped you with Mosaic Wellness? Because, like you said, there was such a varied level of all of these are such different sectors that I'm sure they must have played a role in this startup.
So I think the way the world is evolving, there is a huge value you can now ascribe and collect from very varied experiences. Um, a lot of people are finally doing things which may not be related to their immediate past or immediate experience or the immediate education. So a lot of what you learn actually shapes your mind, shapes your way of thinking, shapes your way of acting. Um, and I think each of these helps me in various different ways. I think the biggest benefit of being an investor is you get to see a certain space and opportunity from a very bird's eye view, from a 10,000 feet high view, and figure out nuances of what is happening. As an investor, you would look at different opportunities every day. They will have different elements attached to them. You would look at opportunities across geographies. You would look at what's happening in the developed market, what's happening in India. I think that freedom to just step back and look at everything gives you a lot of perspective, a lot of ideas, which I think was super helpful. It was one of the things that got us thinking into Mosaic Wellness and why we started.
So first in 2020, you all came up with Man Matters, and then in 2021, you all came up with BeBodywise. So can you tell us about how you all found the product market fit for that?
Finding TNF is there is, so unfortunately there is no formula
Lighting to
for finding TNF. Not just in the space we are in, but I think almost any space. Finding PMF, I mean, what is PMF? PMF is you have a product and you have a market, and your product and market are talking to each other and a perfect fit for each other. There are one way of getting PMF is you have such a strong insight and you have such depth of knowledge and expertise that what you come up with is always going to fit like a glove on day zero on the market and it will be beautiful. I think it never happens. As much as people can plan for it, the reality is you can do all the work prior to get into the market, but there will be things that you don't know. There will be figments of your imagination that you never knew were actually not true. All of this will come to bear as and when you actually go out and implement. And that is when, from where the race to PMF starts. I think the race to PMF has to have 3-4 different things to come together, and none of these, unfortunately, by themselves are a one stone that kills the PMF problem. All of them is play small parts. I think the first is you have to listen very, very carefully to the consumer. So you got a product out in the market. There will be a certain number of consumers who will choose to not buy it. There will be a certain number of consumers who will choose to consider it. A certain number of consumers who will choose to buy it. After that, a certain number will choose to repeat and participate, and certain will say no. You will only get to PMF if you understand all of these consumers very nicely. And how do you do that? You got to speak. You got to be really, really close to the consumer, which is what the digital model lets you do. Like, go back 20 years, you would launch an offline model for distributor लेके जाएगा, वो किसी wholesaler को देगा, wholesaler go to the retailer, then the consumer. You have no connect with the consumer. In the digital world, you have a lot of connect. You have to leverage this connect to really understand what the consumer likes about a proposition, what the consumer dislikes. The moment you have an early finding, ये अच्छा चल रहा है, ये खराब चल रहा है, or whatever it might be, iterate. And by iterate, I don't mean necessarily you have to revamp your whole portfolio, do something entirely different. It's also possible. You get it totally wrong. Very often, it's about making the right tweaks. Are you going after the right consumer segment? You could be going after something, a segment that is not interested in the product, but a segment is very interested in the segments of it. So the grind to PMF is a grind of multiple iterations. Each of those iterations have to be built on getting feedback from your consumers on what they want, what they don't want. As you keep doing that, you get better and better. The flywheel starts rotating. Right there. So that is one whole aspect to get into PMF. And the second part, which very often gets lost because it is not glamorous at all, is having very tight execution in your days. It's very easy in the early days to have sloppy execution because सब कुछ नया है, right? You're setting up stuff for the first time. There are 100 different things happening. You don't have a full-fledged team. It's not like there are 100 people in the company at that point of time to use that. It's very often a really tiny team, a lot of things being haphazard. At that point, having tight execution is priceless. The same plan can be executed by one team very well with a lot of attention to detail and very shabbily by another team. The team that does it shabbily might have the exact same product proposition offering to the consumer, but will not work. This other team is actually the same offering but could do wonders. So I would say focusing on the consumer and then focus on executing tightly can get you the PMF. It is painful. Most often I have seen when you get to the market, you don't get PMF on it. Very rare you get in and you hit the ground running. It typically takes, it could take months, years, even never. I think actually most companies don't find PMF and shut down. That is the default situation that you will see. And a few of them get to it and it will be a long-winded path.
Right. So, once a person starts getting this feedback and starts with all of these iterations, how do you know as a founder when it's time to stop? Because sometimes you're just like, okay, one more iteration, I'll just do a few more and then it'll work. And then we'll reach where we want to reach. But how do you know a good point to stop in this race?
It's a very tough question. It's an extremely tough question. I don't think I can give you one right answer to this, but I'll tell you what I would look at. If I had to decide for myself, is it time to stop or not? What are the things I would consider? First, I would consider, even if I am not gotten to PMF, I would give a lot of consideration to the fact, can I get it at least incrementally better than me? So let's say, I'm just making this up, let's say my economics are at making this up minus 50% because I don't have PMF. So effectively my marketing is not efficient to drive the right amount of revenue. and minus 50% is crack, let's say, in that segment. And I've been trying for 12 months. I've had multiple iterations going through. If that minus 50 has then moved to 45 and 40 and 30 and 25, then that's at least encouraging that I know I'm able to demonstrate a trajectory. So that would give me some comfort. I'm not yet there, but at least I'm making progress in the right direction. On the other hand, if I am doing n number of things, bro, minus 50 already, I got forbid, this is becoming even worse. Then I'm not saying I would stop, but I would significantly put consideration that am I doing something entirely wrong? Should I put a full stop to this? Should I put a full stop? Should I do a hard pivot to something else altogether? Those are thoughts that should cross your mind. So that's one thing that I would look at. The second thing that I would look at, which is a very, very practical consideration, is everyone has to judge basis their own situation. What life stage are you in? The life stage could be economic, for that matter. Because of course, at the end of the day, there are monetary considerations to everything. It could be life stage in terms of where you are, your family's ask requirements, your family's comfort, and so on. I think those things also play a role. So you could have two different individuals because they have very different personal context, taking very different paths altogether. The third thing that I would do to try to not reach a definitive answer but get direction on this is you must have a few, a handful, I'm not saying like double digit also, 3-4 people who you can go to, who have done this journey before, who are way better than you, and who you can sit down with, open your cards, explain exactly where you are, what's working, what's not working, what are the numbers, and get their advice. Not every decision you have to take yourself in a closed room. You need advice. And you need advice, most importantly, from people who are qualified to give you advice. So, with all due respect, your family, for example, might have the best of intentions for you, but they might not understand the context of what it takes to understand. So, they might not be well positioned to give you advice. In fact, you might have to do the opposite. You might have to almost shun their advice because they don't understand the context. They have the best intentions but don't have the context. So you need to have 2-3 people whom you can go to always, bear your heart out, put your facts out there and get their advice. Take that into consideration. If I don't have an answer, I would do a mix of these to figure out what happened.
Right.
And I also think this one fourth point, I think there is absolutely nothing wrong in shutting us up. I think a lot of people don't do it because of call it very log kya kahenge, I will be ashamed of myself, etc. There is nothing to be ashamed of in shutting us up. There's absolutely nothing. So when you started a company which by definition was trying to do something crazy, which is why it's a startup, the reality is 90-95% chances are you will not. So you should give yourself a pat on the back saying I tried hard, but now it's time to move on and do something else. And you have another 40 years ahead of you.
Yeah.
You could do any more interesting things in that. It's not like end of life. So I don't think anyone should not shut down a startup to shut down. That shouldn't be. You should take the right call and move on.
That was actually a very insightful answer. We should all consider all of these parameters before we start. So what I take from this is that we should very closely monitor where our startup is going with each iteration and only then make a choice with the advice of our mentors. So apart from this product market fit, do you think there's any major challenge that your company might have faced?
There are so many. Unfortunately, life of startup is full of challenges. So, see, it can't be easy without challenges because by definition, you're trying to do something that others have not done. So, if others have not done it, chances are that it's a stupid idea or there is actually a very hard path to getting there. So, वो hard path है तो challenges coming, it's very hard to avoid. I think for us, the we launched in April of 2020. So the first biggest obvious challenge was COVID. We launched literally the month after India announced the lockdown. Um, and of course, in hindsight, COVID has helped our business. But at that point of time, there was absolute lack of clarity. There was lack of clarity. Key, what is the implication on our business? There was lack of clarity that will this, for example, totally mess up the funding environment, the startup environment. There was lack of clarity on how many people come to work. And our business involved ongoing operations also. If it's just, let's say, a software service, you could have a remote setup and work. If not efficiently, at least need to. So we had all of those challenges right in our first quarter of launch. And that went on for the next, I think, almost 12 to 18 months because there were n amount of restrictions on physical operations. In our case, we were also doing healthcare products. So we had all the requisite permissions from a legal perspective to continue operations. But the problem is you have the permission. How do you get people? How do you get people and keep those people safe? I mean, at the end of the day, you don't want to do something and put people at risk. How do you get other ecosystem partners? There's nothing you can end up achieving alone. Like today, for us, while we do what we do, there are probably 20, 30 other companies we work with to make our end consumer get what he or she is asking for. Each of them also need to click. Everyone is going through their own amount of research. So I think that was the big early challenge for us. I mean, how you get over it? I think in our case, we had a really good team early on in the company. A bunch of strong go-getters who were very clear कि ये करना है. We want to make this business work. We want to build something amazing. And we just put our heart and soul into it. Worked tirelessly with every ecosystem partner to figure out how we can make things happen. I remember even now we shut our warehouses. We actually were shipping products out of the house of one of our team members. And every day he would take his dad's old car and drive over the orders to the delivery or expressways warehouse and drop them here so that they could be sent onwards to the consumers. So it was like do what it takes to make it happen.
Having a team like that is actually very, very important. So, if you were to hire people for these roles, for like the highest roles in your company, or if you were to co-found your company with other people, what are certain traits you would look for in these people?
I think it is very hard to judge traits in a short interview type of process. I'm not saying one should not do it. You have to do it. We do it every day. But we do get them wrong also. I think the way one should think of it is different at each level. In starting a company, I think for most people, I think it's very helpful to have a co-founder. And I would look for a co-founder who can complement me well. All of us have strengths and weaknesses. You need someone who complements you well on your weaknesses. That's the first thing I urge everyone who's starting up to look for. Find the right co-founder. And I don't mean find as in you just remember route. I mean, this has to be someone new. Because you can't interview a co-founder. It has to be someone you know and you're confident you can work with this person and make things happen. So that's the first step. Then when it comes to the team, the early team for us was actually high energy, high hustle, high drive, generalist profiles who joined us. Most of them joined us at significant pay cuts from what they were doing. They were really driven by what we are trying to do and driven by the task of building a large business, a large company. And that's what they wanted to do. And they had large equity upsides associated with us getting there. And we just worked together very well to solve zero-to-one problems. So that's how I would think of an early thing. Then as the company starts scaling, you start getting specialists who've been there, done that in that particular function. Uh, uh, where we are today, our team actually is a mix of both. We have a bunch of extremely accomplished specialists who are driving specific functions at world-class standards. And we have a bunch of generalists who are driving a number of 0 to 1 projects and initiatives in the company. And that balance is what we are maintaining now. But the early days, I would say, is a lot of the generalists versus the specialists.
Right. So maybe that is what really worked with us, having generalists is very important. You can give them any task and then they will make sure to do it, and they'll do it very well too. So, talking about scalability, like you mentioned, how do you scale a company to where you've reached right now?
So I think first of all, there are two ways of looking at scale. Right? You can look at scale that, okay, you reach so many hundreds of thousands of dollars of revenue, and that is scale. What if you look at scale differently? What if you look at scale to say that last month you were at X and you want to go from X to 1.1X? And you keep doing that 1.1X every month for several months. I think that really disaggregates scale into smaller bite sizes, which are far more easy to comprehend. No company goes from X to Y in one jump. It always happens in small bits and pieces. So getting to scale is a function of, number one, you want to make sure you're playing in the right segment. If you're starting a business, you should not start a business, at least you should not start a startup in a segment which has no scale plus potential. What is the point in building a chukusa business which is cute, works, but उसका कुछ होने वाला नहीं है?
True.
Might as well join a good company and do a great job there as an employee.
Right.
So I think step one is make sure you're playing in a space which has high potential in the new service. Step two is have a really strong team, hire ahead of the curve. Eventually, businesses are made by people. If you don't have the best people, you won't have the best business. It's very simple. Some of the best companies in the world are where they are because they have a mechanism for attracting great talent and retaining great talent and achieving great talent. So that has to be absolute core and center of what you do. Always focus on execution in an absolute brutal way. Smallest things going wrong should create massive pain for them. People should feel that. I think what exactly is good execution? I think good execution in my mind is just a massive attention to detail and a massive focus on giving the customer the best experience. And these are things that some of the no one says we are not attention, we don't give attention to detail. No one says the customer का focus नहीं करते. Everyone says we do it. The question is how much pain do you feel when you work? If you feel a lot of pain, then you're in the right place. Then you will automatically go all out to give that best experience. You make sure loss which we was calm. And that's crucial to keep growing while maintaining decent economics and things. So I would say it's not about how you get 2,000 crore or 5,000 crore or so. It's about how you do these things absolutely clockwork, well planned, ambitiously on a quarter-on-quarter, month-on-month basis, and do it.
Right. So I understand why a founder would feel the pain and if anything goes wrong, but how do you foster the same amount of towards a company and your employees? How do you get them to also feel the same amount of determination, motivation to work the same way as you do?
So I think I don't have one clear answer, but multiple things. Number one, hire people who are high agency. You have people out there who have a 9 to 5 mindset. And I don't mean 9 to 5 by how many hours you work, more in terms of it's a routine for them.
Right.
Versus you have folks who are high agency, who want to make things happen, who want to achieve big things. So that's the first filter. You would want your hiring process to get more of the latter types of things. Second, once you get these guys, you have to empower them. So you cannot get a rock star and then treat the person in a corporate person or in a role where they're practically handcuffed into doing a very high job. The person will lose out motivation. You got to empower the right, get the right people, empower them. Third, you got to make sure that if they are not, they don't want to feel like employees, they want to feel like owners of the business, and they have to be real owners of the business. You have to have a generous piece of policy where you economically incentivize everyone, and there is a clear path for a large outcome, a large financial outcome. For when should this company work? See, why does there are you say founders will feel that way. I think founders feel that way because of two reasons. First is the emotional connect with the company and the cause, and second is the economic connect with the company and the cause. And what I mean by both the emotional is that you really want it to succeed, even if you don't need the money for various other reasons you want it to succeed. And economic is obvious. You own so much of the company becomes super valuable. You want to be very rich. Both of these need to happen for every person you join. You need to figure out how. The second one is the easy solve. You give equity to people, so it's economic solve. The first one requires you to get the right people and then nurture them, empower them, give them all the power to do things in the right way in the company, and people will not feel like employees. They will feel like owners. And I'm not saying that we managed to make 100% of people feel that way. I don't think that's true. There will be a lot of people who would not feel that way. But I think even if you can get 10 to 15% of your company to feel that way, you're home. Because the reality is in any business, there will be 10% of people who will drive 90% of the value creation. And the other 90% will drive a very tiny part of the value creation. You have to figure out how you get those 10-15% people and how you get them. That's when you're home.
Right. Can you share a little more light on the journey of Mosaic Wellness from when you started to right now?
My co-founder and I worked together in our first firm, Iterating. This is way back in 2005, right after graduating. I joined. I joined iFlex, which got acquired by Oracle around the time we joined. And both of us had joined the same batch. And they had these training batches. So every training batch was about 15 people. We got put in the same training batch. And so for the 2 weeks of training, we were together, and then of course we were both working in Bombay, which is how we got to know each other. And then we both went our different ways, but we kept in very good touch. And our careers were in some way in form overlapping in various ways in similar industries, companies, and sectors. Which is why when we wanted to finally start up, the thought was that let's do it together. Also, we feel complement each other quite well, very different personalities in some way. So there was a thought at that point that towards the end of 2018 is when we started serious thinking, we should be doing something, should we drop our jobs and do something else together. And somewhere in 2019, after a lot of deliberation, a lot of fighting our fears, but I don't think it's easy to stop your job and go into the unknown. To pull the triggers and take the call.
And so how did that happen? Because I really doubt a lot of people would do this, take this step, because having a job is being in a very comfortable place where you already know you're going to get the salary. How do you leave that and move to something totally different? Where you're very sure that okay, this idea really has a lot of potential. It's going to work out very well for us.
First of all, I don't think everyone should do it. Okay. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. I think there is a great amount of work one can do working in good companies. You can solve great real world problems working in great companies. You can also make great financial outcomes. Gone are the days from parents' generation, for example, where working in a company meant you would always have a very weak economic outcome. A very strong economic outcomes possible today. So I think this FOMO of startup ही करना चाहिए, company चालू किया तो क्या किया, I think that's bullshit. I think a lot of people will do wonderful contribution to both society and themselves by doing a phenomenal job in good companies. So people should not try to figure out answer कि what do we need to do to convince ourselves to be good. Yeah, क्या problem? So that's the first. Second is I think it also depends on it is very rarely driven by the conviction on the idea because before launch now सभी idea convincing. It's only when you launch you realize the gaps when customers say I don't want to buy your product. तभी जाके पता चलता है कि why this idea was not such a big deal. I am not when I look around me all the people in startup I think almost all of them do it out of a deep drive कि कुछ बनाना है कितना बनाना है versus कि अरे ये idea is the perfect idea. In fact, most successful large companies today, if you go back into the history, most of them would have started with something else altogether and then pivoted into the current avatar. Very often multiple pivots, not even one. So conviction in your initial idea is I think the worst reason to start.
Yeah.
I think you should only start up if you're very sure you want to build something on your own and that's the way you want to do it. Otherwise there are enough other options out there.
Yeah. So if you're very driven from the start that banana hai kuch and you have the conviction ke bana hi lenge, but sometimes a person is just not a good leader or might not be able to be a good co-founder and found the company. Is there any way of knowing this, or do you just have to try it out, work it out, and see if it works, or and then if it's not working, you move back to a job or something?
I think, basically, I don't think anyone should be in tearing hurry to start. Right? You have, I don't know, it depends. You could argue 20, 30, 40 years ahead of you in your working life. That's a lot of time. I don't think anyone should be in a hurry. Join a company, join an interesting startup in a junior to mid role, work there for a couple of years, you will get a very good understanding of what it takes to build something. Maybe you won't even get a full understanding, but you'll at least get reasonable perspective. So, of course, there are some amazing examples of people who literally started out of campus and did wonderfully well. There are people who even dropped out. Mark Zuckerberg dropped out and founded Meta, right? So it's not to say that one should never hurry into it, but there is no reason to hurry into it. Go to some great place. Today we have so many people who have joined us somewhere in the last 5-6 years, left and started a company of their own and are very well. There are multiple of these examples. So I think you will never know the absolute answer, but when you are operating without any experience whatsoever, you have no perspective to find the answer. When you have had a few interesting real world experiences, you might still get it wrong, but at least you have perspective. And you might be better positioned to take that call, figure out what it takes versus just saying.
So you've invested in other startups also. So have you seen something similar in these founders that they have a certain conviction, or what do you look for in the founder? Because when they come and they pitch their startup to you, you only know what they tell you. But based on that, how do you make a decision whether or not a founder is good enough to bet on personally?
Really, first of all, the approach is very different depending on the stage of the company. Like when I was at 8 Roads, I'm investing to be A to B, C, early growth kind of companies. There, of course, you are looking very closely at the top team, the founders, and trying to build conviction on them. But apart from that, you are also significantly spending time on looking at the numbers. These are real businesses, they have real numbers. Looking at the numbers, you can tell whether the business is working well or not, there's enough opportunity or something. So I think that part of the investing is very easy. The part where it is super early, it's a seed stage opportunity, it's 2-3 people who are just coming together and कोई करना है आज के हाथ में कुछ नहीं है You don't even have a working prototype for that matter sometimes. I think that's where it becomes tricky, and that's where you will look for two or three things. First of all, you will look for hard skills and soft skills in those people. Hard skills is depending on what you are trying to do, you have the functional depth of knowledge to succeed in that. So, for example, I'm just making this up, but let's say someone is saying, okay, I'm going to make a soft, a hardware robot to manage, to automate warehouses. I'm making this up, random example. And if that's what you want to make, and you work on the best robotic automation team of Amazon that looks at automation all the warehouses globally and done it for 10 years in a reasonably senior role, I would feel like, okay, at least this person knows what he or she is talking about. And has the depth of expertise to potentially succeed. Surely succeed to किसी का भी नहीं, but potentially succeed. So that is one aspect you would look at. What are you trying to build versus that obvious skill set? The second one is soft skill, which is in a startup, you will have a huge impact of the soft skills on the outcome manufacturing. What are the soft skills? First is perseverance. Like I was mentioning sometime back, invariably in the early days, you're gonna have shit in the and it'll look very good. So do you have the perseverance to sit that period out, keep trying, keep making attempts, get things out? You have the perseverance to just be there and not give up. And I'm not saying infinitely, that's hard right now. But you give it enough time before you put it out. That is very important. Leadership. When you get and attract the right team, you have the ability to sell, which becomes very crucial. So all of these software aspects are the other part that we will look at. Most important, at least for me, very rarely have I invested behind people I don't know at all. Most of the cases is people who either I have worked with or someone who I closely trust as a first person point of view. So it could be people I have worked with closely, it could be batchmates of mine, it could be even friends in some cases, but not like that, and very messy. It could be in my close circle, but people may not work very closely with and so on. So that's how I tend to go about it in every stage, which is get conviction on the functional skill set of the person and get very high conviction on the individual's intrinsic qualities as well.
Understand. So, I would like to talk a little bit about Mosaic Wellness and how you'll involve your customers into the business and use that to scale the business. So there are so many businesses right now. So B2C is very saturated. So how do you build a moat around that, and how do you really interact with these customers to make sure your product really works and reaches the masses?
Okay. So I think the word moat now, it's a very dangerous word, because when people think of moat, they think of this gigantic unfair advantage that one company or one person has. Like people say, Unilever के पास distribution है offline, or Google has its search algorithm, no one else has, or Facebook has its data of every consumer, or Nivea is a brand, it's like such a strong brand. So people think of moat in that way, like there's this one behemoth, unbeatable force that you have with you. I think that's the wrong way to think about moats for a startup in the early days. I think for a startup, the way you should think about moats is two, three things. First is you should think of moat in a much smaller way. Okay, what can I do which is slightly better than everyone else? Okay. And I'm underlining the word slightly. To try to think that I will do something that no one has ever done before by a big margin, because of this massive advantage might put you into unrealistic side. So think of being incrementally better. That's the first thing about moats. So you could have a moat where you are just 10% better on certain aspect than your customers. The second part about moat is, I think people fail to realize that a moat is also some of the parts. A moat does not have to be inherently one thing. You could do you could be 10% better than someone else on 5 different parameters. Put together, you're 50% better. And it's very important to think of moats also. Uh, if you were looking for the 100% better moat, it's very hard. The third thing about moats is there is one moat which is available free of cost to every company out there, but very few of them end up using it. And that moat is execution.
Right.
I say it's available free of cost because you don't need some supercomputer, you don't need some hard to get resource, some expensive resource. You just need a certain attitude, vigor, vision, and leadership to get kick-ass execution. I think kick-ass execution is the biggest moat for company. Execution by itself is a moat. And in quest of finding some other fancier moat, I think people just forget this. So, summing it up, I would say number one, moats can be small, they need not be large. Number two, moats should be some other parts, and many small moats. You don't have to have one mega moat. And third is, one of your moats has to be execution abilities. It is very unlikely that you do really well in the early days, get to a certain size and scale, without out executing others just in sheer tenacity. So that's how I have come to think about moats. In my investing days, when I was investing in good stage companies, the moats we would look for were far bigger. The moats we look for today in Mozaic Wellness, because we scale, are far bigger. The moats that we look for a view on 5 years back were far smaller. If I look back for us, so we got mathematics in 2020, our first moat on mathematics was actually just competition. So every brand out there would talk about women very fondly, would talk about how you need to do XYZ for women, taking care of women, taking care of kids, etc. Those are brands focused on. No one spoke about men. No one spoke about the problems that men were having. And that counterposition that we took, that they don't just talk about this in an entirely different way, was a motion because no one else had done it. Execution was a single biggest moat at that point. I think continues to be. Okay. So moats at that point were very different. Moats for us today, now that we have scaled to a considerable size, are very different. Now brand becomes a moat because we have invested in the brand across the last 5-6 years. But that brand is now strong enough for people to resonate with. That becomes a moat. Economies of scale become a moat. Network effects become a moat. Because now we are large, well established in the business, we are able to leverage our network to do things that other people can't. So your moats also change over time. Moats are not the same. Even Unilever, when it started, 100 years ago, whenever it started, distribution was its moat on day zero. With Abhi Banana in the last several years, or maybe the last 3, 4, 5 decades, would not have been the case on day zero. Or I said Nivea has brand as a moat. It would not have been the case for the first 10 years of their existence. So your moats also change. It's not a static thing that remains the same over the entire life of a
For an early startup, how can the founder make sure that execution happens very well? Like you mentioned ESOPs, but ESOPs I think will come at a later stage. Before that, how do you make sure your team is very motivated and how do you get that execution out of your team?
I don't think ESOPs by itself lead to execution. I don't think that came out wrong from me. ESOPs lead to
a way to work for the company so that when the company gets better, even you will be at a better position.
To sum it up again, two things that differentiate an employee from a owner. There is a sentimental connect with the company and the cause and a will to make it, a very hard will to make it succeed. And there is an economic benefit that accrues from that success. There are two things that happen. ESOPs also will happen effectively. That hopefully leads to better execution also, but it doesn't happen. I think to get execution right, I think number one, I said it before, if you have a great team on board, you can't execute with a weak team. Or you can't execute well enough with a weak team. So you got to have a really strong team on board. You got to empower the team. And you as a founder have to focus on execution. I see now and then some founders sitting in an ivory tower, being some push very. You got to get into the testing modes. You got to be in the warehouse and get stuff going. You got to go out there and meet various people. So you have to set an example for people. If you are going to be laid back, don't expect the बाकी लोग सब एकदम social execution करें. People will look to you and learn from you. So set the example yourself. Walk the talk that you're and that is good.
Thank you so much. Like you mentioned, it's been a circle of life. You've come back to our college after so many years. How does it feel to be here?
It's great. I was just telling him in the start when he got me up. First of all, it looks very different. It's far more grand. It's bigger. Everything is looking far more beautiful. I see a lot more people also in the college. So it feels very different, but I'm so glad to be back. I'm back here. I did come in now and then, but I don't think I've been here at least for the last 2 or 3 years. So it feels phenomenal to be back.
Thank you so much for coming. It was such a great conversation. We got so many insights out of you. It was a very helpful podcast for any new age founders who would want to get into startups, would want to know how to get into startups. So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. My pleasure.